halftime in that game against the Broncos. I mean, there's only a handful of quarterbacks that can spin it like that, but still, Patrick Mahomes is on a different level. You're talking about, and this is not hyperbolic, the best start to any quarterback's NFL career. That's Patrick Mahomes. He's already got a Super Bowl and an MVP on his resume. Let's pump the brakes, putting Josh Allen in that territory.
One thing I will give Josh Allen credit for, and it's actually a great scene. If you saw the game, it was in Denver. Obviously, the no fans and all that are limited fans. When the Bills bus pulled out of the parking lot at the Broncos stadium, there was a large amount of Bills fans in the parking lot. You can only imagine what the scene was like in Orchard Park. I quickly want to mention Josh Allen gets one over on the Broncos. The Broncos coached him at the Senior Bowl. They are still in search of a quarterback. They actually coached Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen that week. Obviously didn't have the opportunity to draft Baker Mayfield going 1 overall, but they had the opportunity to draft Josh Allen.
They took Brad Chubb instead. I wonder if John Elway's second-guessing himself on that one, seeing what Josh Allen has become.
Yes, considering they have not made the playoffs since Peyton Manning retired, and they are still in search of that quarterback. They had Josh Allen up close and personal, could have grabbed him. Instead, Buffalo did. They're not looking back, and the Broncos are still looking for their signal caller. We're looking forward to the college football playoff. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame. No real surprise. The Rose Bowl game presented by Capital One. That'll be Alabama and Notre Dame. Moved from Pasadena to Arlington, Texas. That's because Pasadena is saying no friends and family at the game, so they moved it to Arlington. Keep in mind, Notre Dame's Brian Kelly said they might actually opt out of the playoff if they weren't allowed to have friends and family attend, and apparently he was serious. The game, in large part, maybe due to his musings, was moved. All-State Sugar Bowl, Clemson and Ohio State in New Orleans. That'll be the nightcap. Obviously, those teams have a bit of a history in the CFP. Gary Barta, the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee, answering this question from Reese Davis.
For the last spot, you had Notre Dame 4, Texas A&M 5. What gave the Fighting Irish the edge over the Aggies?
Well, you painted the picture of two teams that have really similar resumes. They've played similar schedules. Coming into this weekend, Notre Dame was undefeated. They had beaten the number 2 team now in Clemson and on the road against the number 13 team in North Carolina. And Texas A&M's top win was against a very good Florida team. So very similar resumes, but in the end, the committee felt like Notre Dame had earned its way there based on the complete analysis of the resume, and that probably came down to having an additional win against a ranked team.
Yeah, the committee made the right call on that one, putting Notre Dame in the college football playoff. I mean, the team they lost to in the conference championship, they beat earlier in the season, and like you said, Clemson was number 2 at the time, even though they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. That was still a thrilling game, went into overtime, but Notre Dame was able to win that one. I don't think they were prepared for what they saw when they went down to Charlotte to play Clemson the second time around, because that was a little bit of a different story. But still, Notre Dame's body of work, I feel like they should get the edge over Texas A&M in the CFP.
There's no doubt. Jimbo Fisher did say there had never been an SEC team with one loss that was left out, but obviously this is not exactly as comparable as the other years. I also got to mention that this is a tough thing to do because this guy is not a public speaker. He's a suit. He's an athletic director. But I thought of all the years of the playoff, and now we're entering our 7th year of the playoff. The committee did as bad of a job every week explaining things. I mean, they were just getting ripped to shreds. And I understand it's a rite of passage that when you do anything wrong, you get ripped to shreds on Twitter. That's just the way the world works in 2020. But I really thought Barta, who is the athletic director at Iowa, simply had a lot of difficulty explaining himself. I think it's pretty obvious that every week they came out, they had the same 4 teams. We had the same 4 again yesterday, except the order was flipped a little bit. But I don't think they did themselves any favors here with the way that this went down. I think a lot of people were very upset that Cincinnati, by the way, Saturday night, nobody's talking about this because everybody only talks about the top 4 teams. How about finishing undefeated opposite Alabama, Florida, so I know nobody's watching it, winning on a 34-yard field goal with no time left in your conference championship game to finish a perfect regular season. Absolutely no shake at it. I just thought the way that it was enunciated, I just thought a lot of people, a lot of fans have lost confidence in the committee. The choice was obvious. They made it. It wasn't difficult. But I just feel like more and more people are just looking at the committee and saying, you can't just come out there and say, we watch a lot of football. There was a photo posted the other day. You tell me, you're the football player. I'm just a fan. There was a photo posted of the politically correct committee watching everything over the weekend. Right? Everybody's sitting in their chairs. Everybody's got a mask on. No notes, no clicker, nothing that would indicate, like, let's go back and watch this again, or do I have a couple of notes on this team? It's just a bunch of dudes sitting in a room, socially distanced with their masks on, staring at a TV. Listen, man, I watch football, you watch it at a higher level than I do and most of our listeners do. But the fact that you just come out there and say, we watch a lot of football and this is what we like and this is what we saw, I just thought it was a really bad year for the committee.
Well, I think there's overall a frustration with the lack of transparency throughout the process, right? You talked about it throughout the entire year. The committee hasn't done a good job of explaining things. And I understand that things are upside down because we're dealing with playing college football in the middle of a pandemic, and you're juggling schedules and you're trying to figure out if teams have enough of a body of work to merit consideration. But all that being said, I think you do have to at least give the public some information about the rhyme and reason and how you're coming to the decisions that you're making. And the fact that you don't have that is what leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. I mean, Cincinnati is not the first Group of 5 program that we're talking about running the table and going undefeated
UCF.
And not getting in. UCF a few years ago, and they had to settle for playing Auburn in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. So I mean,
winning.
And they ended up winning. So I mean, it just goes to show you that the College Football Playoff Committee doesn't put a lot of respect with those Group 5 conferences, and you really have to be a Power 5 conference team in order to have a path in order to get into the college football playoff, be one of the Final 4 teams. If you don't, you have little to no chance of being able to get in.
Yeah, and I think if this year was the year for them to be able to sneak in with all the absurdity and the craziness of the season, if you're not going to be able to do it this year, I think moving ahead, as Kirk Herbstreit said, when he joined our program last week, he said 2 things. One, the system is broken. They need to find a way to make it more exciting. It's a predictable finish the entire way. It also devalues what many people think is the best regular season in sports if it's going to be such a great regular season and you know who's already going to be in the postseason. And he also said it's time for the Group of 5 and the Power 5 to just break apart. The Group of 5 could have their own playoff, and whether BYU or Coastal or Cincinnati, they could be able to crown their own champion and say, hey, we were the best of this lot. And meanwhile, the Power 5 would be able to just rake in all the money and do what they want to do and break apart. Anyway, I wanted to ask you this. Normally, conference championship games are held on about, like the 5th or 6th of December, giving most teams about a month off before they would end up playing their bowl game, whether it's on New Year's Eve or on New Year's Day. This time around, it's not like that at all. You basically cut it in half. You basically get yourself a bye week, and then you get a game week, and then you're going. How do you think that affects the playoff, essentially having half as much time to prepare because the season got pushed back so much?
Well, I think the target for the players is a lot closer, so it's easier to stay locked in and stay focused on the task at hand. When you have that month layoff before you play again, I mean, a lot can be lost in that situation. I know that coach is going to kind of a spring ball mentality with their players, but I mean, not playing football for a month, it's hard to kind of get back to the form that you had, especially if your team is playing really well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what this college football playoff is going to look like, but I think we're going to be in store for a higher level of football than we've seen in playoffs past.
Agreed. Keyshawn J.